All righty, it is 3 o'clock. I want to welcome you all to Replenish. This is an atmosphere of discovery. We are discovering the master's plan. Sometimes along that journey of discovery, there are things we find that are hard to process, things that we don't like. And so, even if they are things that we do not like, we still want to process those things and come to an understanding so that we can grow, so that we can become better and just be better overall people in this world. So today, our session is on suffering. Today's session is on suffering. And so, suffering is often described as an affliction or alongside something that deeply troubles you. But it's more of a capacity to experience or be subjected to strong emotions as a result of what may be troubling you. Okay. So, because the situation evokes such a deep emotion, it often affects you on a soul level. And so, this is where soul wounds come from. And we briefly talked about that in previous sessions. Um, your soul is where the center of your identity is. Okay. Your soul is where your will and your emotions are. Okay. So what you are suffering with can quickly become who you are. It can become a state of being, an identity. So you temporarily become the emotion that you are experiencing, the emotion that you are tolerating, the emotion that you are affected by. Okay. For an example, when you suffer from anxiety, you've expanded your capacity to experience this emotion. And so if you disallow room for negative emotions, then they won't fit. Okay. You disallow them by filling yourself with more positive emotions so that there's no room for the negative emotions to come in. And so that means you have to do things that evoke these positive emotions, not the negative ones. So because you've made room for the negative ones, right? Here comes other negative ones to see if you will expand or make room or tolerate them as well. Okay, to see if you will suffer for them. So now you have become known as an anxious person because you now accepted it as your identity. So instead of only being anxious because of that one event or because of something that one person said, you become anxious about everything, right? Because you've expanded your capacity to experience that. Okay. Instead of being angry about that one thing that happened, now you're angry about everything because now this has become who you are. Instead of being bitter or fearful or disappointed about that one particular situation, you are all of those to everything. Okay. If you are experiencing this, you have accepted the emotion from your momentary suffering as an identity. Okay. But just as there is a capacity requirement to suffering, there is also an endurance characteristic applied to suffering, which implies that it is or it should be a temporary state. Our suffering is never supposed to overcome us. It's never supposed to be something that happens long term. Okay. So an event that happens in your life can cause temporary strain on you mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, right? Which reveals your capacity to experience that, to tolerate that. But your level of endurance and the length of time that you allow it to overwhelm you is determined if you stay in that state or if you move to overcoming. Okay, so we don't want to stay in the state of suffering. We want to move to overcoming whatever we are suffering with. Okay, suffering happens if you ask yourself, why? Why does this happen to me? Why do I have to go through this? Suffering happens because of decisions made by you or made by somebody else. It's because of a decision. Whenever a decision is made, an action pursues that decision, right? That action causes someone to experience a deep emotion for a temporary moment. It's one of the consequences of humanity's fallen state, right? It's lack of partnership with God. So if you believe in God, that doesn't, and your actions reflect that, that doesn't mean everybody else does. So their decisions can cause suffering upon people who are also believers of God. So when you say, how can God allow something to happen? No, it was a decision from a human being that allowed that to happen. It's not God's fault. And that's a lot of times we don't understand the concept of free will. God does not get involved with our will, right? So it's not God that did it, it's the human being that did it. Okay. You suffer when you do not hear instruction or when you fail to remain disciplined. Okay. When you're going in the opposite direction, it causes you to suffer. These are choices, and the suffering is a consequence to your decision. Okay. So a lot of suffering that we go through is because of decisions that we made or the decisions that someone else made that affected us. Okay. If you are a person who has no faith, you will suffer long. That's why it's good to always have that substance of hope. When you become hopeless, it's easier for you to make room for those negative emotions. Okay. When you begin to feel hopeless about anything, you want to think on those things that bring about peace, love, that bring about an excitement. Okay. Did you know that you can experience excitement on an emotional level? You can experience excitement just like you can experience anger. Okay. The more suffering you have experienced, the more peace you need to find or create, right? Because you've already stretched your capacity to receive negativity. So if you think about it as like an elastic balloon, right? When you stretch it to receive negative, if you get rid of that negative, you got to fill it with positive. And if you stretched it full of negative, you need just as much positive to fill that. Okay. This will help you understand why some people need more love than others because they suffered more. Why some people need more compassion than others because they suffered more. Parents, this is why your children who have suffered more need more peace. They need more excitement. And sometimes we call this ADHD or lack of focus. Even procrastination can be a sign that more positive emotions are needed to fill that void that suffering has caused, right? So we have all of these labels when sometimes it is an issue with the brain, and then sometimes it's just this person has suffered so much that they need to be recalibrated with positivity, right? Not negative. Okay. Sometimes children come out of the womb like this, right? Because spiritually, it's a sign that the mother or father suffered in some way. Okay. And so we have to understand that, especially with dealing with each other, that people, and it's based on their experience, right? So you could have gone through the same thing, but you didn't allow the suffering to last. But if it traumatized them more, they need more than you. Okay, so it's not fair to compare your suffering with someone else because it's their experience. It's how they perceive it. It's how they experience it to be. Okay. And so we have expanded our capacity to experience suffering in a negative way for so long that we have become comfortable with suffering and not comfortable with freedom. Freedom is when you suffer from a positive emotion, right? I'm suffering from happiness, right? I'm suffering from joy. Okay. But because we've suffered longer than we've been free, we've adapted to that as a way of life and as an identity. Okay. And like I said, it can be one event or one person that causes you to feel this deep emotion. And if you don't take positive in all of the other negative things. So it might have been anger, but now bitterness and hatred and wrath and all of these other things come because you invited one in and they say, okay, well, you can tolerate that one. You can tolerate this too. And before long, that becomes who you are. So even if something happy happens to you, you're full of negative emotions. So that's all you're going to express. You can't even be happy, right? So you can get caught in that cycle of suffering because of your lack of awareness, because you fail to address your emotions, because you don't even address your feelings. Your feelings are here. Like you can decide in a moment, am I going to feel this or not? Your emotions are here. They're in your soul. Okay? And so you won't even address what you feel, like what you're thinking about. So you're surely not going to address what's in your heart, right? Your feelings help you to describe or interpret your emotions. When you name your feelings about a person or an event, then it allows you to be able to get to the root of that emotion. And then you'll quickly find that sometimes it's not even about that person or that thing, that specific thing that happened. It's about the relation, the memory, or the attachment to your emotional history, right? So that person or that event triggered an old unprocessed feeling. Okay. And most people won't admit it because they're embarrassed. But you are triggered because that wound was not healed. Okay. And it isn't healed because you won't tell the truth about what you feel or you don't know the truth. Okay. And some people can heal without knowing the truth. They don't need to know why it happened. They can heal without knowing the truth because they've disallowed that space for negative emotion. They've processed what they feel, they addressed it, they made their peace. But other people need the truth in order to find that peace. Okay. And sometimes the truth is not enough for you. So you need more peace. You need more love. You need more positive things so that you will be full of positivity. Okay. You are tempted by discomfort and distractions. All of those infirmities in your mind, in your body, and your emotions would subject you to suffering. They expose you to be tempted out of discipline or self-control. Okay. Suffering will cause you to break good habits. Suffering will kill your good moral character, right? Something that you said you would never do because you've been suffering so long, you find yourself saying the things you wouldn't say, doing the things you said you wouldn't do, right? Suffering also changes sound perspectives, right? You could always make a good decision, but because you've suffered so long, you start making rash and impulse decisions. Okay. Most of us have suffered some form of loss, right? And loss are events that cause you to suffer, right? And so I'm going to name some emotions dealing with some of these ways that we've suffered loss. And I want you to reveal your true feelings about it. See if these events have caused you to suffer longer than you should have, right? If you desire to come out of suffering negatively, you have to choose to listen, watch, and do things in order to control that in a positive way. Okay. Remember, suffering is temporary. It's not supposed to be long lasting. Suffering is temporary and it is the consequence to the decisions that you have made or someone else has made toward you. But it is not who you are and it should not be long term. Okay. So these are emotions, what I'm going to list to you. You may not recognize them because you've never allowed yourself to feel. Okay. Your feelings interpret your emotions. If you block out your feelings, you'll never get to the root of why you feel the way you do, why you feel what you feel in your soul. Okay. So the feelings happen from the way you think, and the emotion is in your soul. Emotions are deeper than just your thinking, right? So you can feel angry, but not be angry, right? So one of the ways we suffer loss is through family separation. One of the ways we suffer loss is through family separation. And some emotions that can come up from that is fear of the unknown, anxiety, stress, anger, loneliness. These are just examples of the things that you feel in your heart. Okay. So if you have suffered loss through a family separation, you want to write down your feelings about that. And maybe you just remember the name of the people or the person. Okay. The next way we've suffered loss is through neglect. The emotions around neglect is anxiety, depression, stress, anger, sadness, shame. These are just examples. You might feel something different. You might have experienced something different with neglect, okay? The next loss is betrayal. When you are betrayed, the emotions that you will feel is grief, anger, anxiety, fear, okay? Abandonment. If you've suffered because of abandonment, some of the emotions you will feel is jealousy, anxiety, devastation, distress. And with abandonment, if you someone who have abandonment issues, most of those are rooted in the past. So if you want to start overcoming those abandonment issues, you have to start focusing on now. You have to bring your now and your future into your view and not keep looking back. Because remember, if you keep looking back, that's the direction that you're going to go. Okay. Also, rejection. We suffer loss from rejection, and emotions that come up from rejection is loneliness, guilt, shame, embarrassment, anger, depression, right? And if you suffer from rejection and also abandonment, these are two things that for this, you have to build your self-worth. You. So it has to be something that you do. You cannot look outwardly for other people to build this for you. Okay? This needs to be something that you feel deep within you about who you are. Okay? And there is a difference between rejection and abandonment. So rejection is more about not getting what you want. So you wanted somebody to respond this way and they didn't, right? You wanted this type of thing, or you wanted to go here, but you couldn't go or you couldn't do it. So rejection is about not getting what you want. Abandonment is more specific to a person giving you something like love, right? They're giving you something like love or comfort, and then they take it away. So abandonment is more specific to a person in giving you something and then taking that away from you, giving you safety and then taking that away from you. That causes abandonment issues, okay? Humiliation is a loss, right? And the emotions from that is shame, guilt, regret, revenge, anger, fear, right? You suffer loss when you are humiliated, right? And it evokes these negative emotions, okay? And the last one I'm going to talk about is injustice. When you suffer injustice, it causes anger, guilt, anxiety, depression, and aggression. So these are just some examples of some emotions that comes from these types of losses, right? So if you have been suffering from any of these events and it's been longer than 5 years, and you have yet to address your emotions associated with them, then you have some work to do, right? Because the more you let it stay and don't deal with it, the more negative emotions come, the more it doesn't even matter. At this point, it's not even triggers. You just associate everything that happens in your life, every person that comes into your life with negative emotions, right? Because you're not dealing with any of it. And so I'm sure you have invited a host of other negative emotions to that party because it has attached to your identity. Now that's who you are. You are, I don't know if some of you have heard, you are a negative person because you're full of negative emotions, right? And you want to begin to separate the event, the emotion from who you are. You want to separate that. This means you are saying who you are, not what event happened. Some people describe themselves as the event that happened to them. That's how they describe who they are. They literally have become what they suffered from. Okay? So you start by confessing that you are not what has happened to you. Okay? And a lot of times with this, we won't admit that we suffered from something that happened to us. So you have to start there. You have to address your feelings. You have to address your emotions, right? And you're not doing this with someone who's not safe. If they're not a safe place to do that, you're not doing that with another person that's not safe, right? You're doing this with yourself or someone that is a safe place for you. Okay, so you start by confessing that you are not what has happened to you. Okay, confess how it made you feel and why. Okay, decide what to do with that emotion. It's one thing to be aware of it, but you have to do something with it or it stays. Okay, are you going to sit with it? Are you going to embrace it? Then overcome it. What are you going to do with that emotion? Okay, and give yourself a time limit of how long you're going to sit with it. You're going to sit with it for 5 minutes? Is it going to take you 2 hours? Give yourself a limit for how long you're going to sit and embrace this before you overcome it. Okay, then you make a choice to fill yourself with a positive emotion and then purposely attach it to that event or person. Find something positive. You can't find all the negative and feed all the negative with no positive. Find something positive and purposely attach it to that person, purposely attach it to that event. Okay, so that every time you think of a person or event, it no longer triggers you negatively, but you begin to utilize your power to overcome. And that person or that event no longer holds power over you. The more you suffer with it, the more power it has. Okay? So depending on the length of time that you've suffered and how many things you've suffered, understand that you would have to increase your positive emotions more than others. Some things that you suffered, it took you 5 minutes to get over. And you don't judge it based off somebody else suffering. They have different influences. They had a different environment, right? You don't, this is an individual thing. Okay? This is between you and your emotions. Okay? If you're going to suffer from something, suffer from happiness, right? Expand your capacity to experience joy and love instead of sadness and anger. And like I said, because we've become so used to suffering, we don't choose happiness. Happiness is knocking on the door. You know, joy is knocking on the door, and we're like, I'm not answering that because this suffering is who I am, right? So I don't just want you to feel these things and be aware of these things. It's important that you do something and do it one at a time, right? Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't sit and say, every year something has happened to me since I was born, so I'm not doing anything. No, start with this year. Just start with this week. What did you suffer from this week? Let's break that apart. Because what happens is from that moment on, you'll learn to name your feelings, right? You will learn to deal with them quickly so that they don't pile up and you become overwhelmed, and then it has power over you. Okay, so start right where you are. It matters in the sense of it's important, but it doesn't matter where you start, just start. Okay, so understand, I'm not saying the suffering that you have experienced doesn't matter. It matters that you start, okay, that you start dealing with it. So don't look at how much suffering. Just take one thing at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself. If you need an outlet, I believe everyone on here has my contact info if you need help sorting through it, right? But I'm not going to go through a bunch of things. We're going to deal with one thing at a time, right? And some things are attached to other things. So sometimes you can knock out 5 things with just one, at one time. Okay. And so here's a thought that I want to leave you with. You cannot outsuffer God's comfort. You cannot outsuffer God's comfort, because for whatever you've gone through, He's bigger than that, right? And I know whatever you've gone through wants to be bigger than Him, right? But nothing is bigger than Him, because He has the greatest capacity of love, and he has that fountain of compassion, right? And it never dries up. He can give all his love away and still have all the love. Are you understanding me? Okay, so I want you to understand that we all suffer. We all suffer, but it's also our capacity to experience that suffering. And some people have a lower tolerance for experiencing suffering, right? So they know, okay, this is what I'm going through. I'm giving it 5 minutes and I'm done. I don't care if I know the truth. I don't care what else is involved. I'm done. I'm not going to suffer from it. Some people have not learned that yet. So if you suffer from something, don't compare your suffering to other people's suffering. Don't do that. That's their experience. That's your experience, right? They may have suffered longer than you for the exact same thing. Maybe you lived in the exact same household. Their capacity to suffer and what they're able to experience and what they're able to endure and tolerate is different from yours. It's different. Okay. And so I want you to understand that. Stop the comparison. Do not compare with other people. There's so many factors that is involved with that. Okay. Do your work. Okay. And like I said, once you can just work on these different things that you've suffered from, explain your feelings about it, get to the root of the emotion, and then choose to put a positive emotion and purposely attach it to that event or to that person. Okay. And so these are just the basics. If you have a therapist, this is something that you can work on alongside whatever they are doing with you. If you don't have a therapist, if you feel you need one, definitely get one. I'm available as well if you need help sorting through these different things. But I'm not going to allow you to overwhelm me, right? We're going to work through this together, and we're going to do it one thing at a time. Okay. So these are things that the timing of it depends on you. And it also depends on if you're actually going through other things while you're trying to address these issues. Okay. So sometimes you got to kind of pause where you are and address whatever is relevant right then at that moment. And don't get frustrated. It's a process. Go through the process, right? It is important that you go through the process for your growth. Okay. So that concludes our session for today. I want to end with our statement. Today is the day for the new me. To follow the instructions. I've given you instructions, right? To be the example for my peers. I will be understanding. I will be more open to learn how to respond, to feel happy about all of the things that once affected me. I am somebody's answer today and in the future. And so the list of things that I listed, the way that we have suffered loss, right? The way that we have suffered loss, sometimes you can't talk to the grown you. If you've experienced suffering as a child, you have to talk to the child. Okay? Because there's things you understand now that the child didn't understand, right? So sometimes you have to speak to that child in the language that that child understands. You have to tell that child, the you that never grew up, because there's parts of us that never grew up because our soul is stuck at that age, right? Because the suffering was so traumatic. And you have to tell that child, it's not your fault. You are not what has happened to you, right? And that will be breakthrough for so many people, okay? And just relieving yourself of the responsibility and understanding that it was a decision that was made either by you or someone connected to you that caused this, okay? You are not what you are suffering from. You can come out of it. It is temporary. You don't have to stay there forever. You can come out. You can come out into the light, open the window, open the doors, and experience freedom, experience positive emotion. And so that is my time. I pray you all are blessed on today. Do the work, enjoy life, suffer from happiness, suffer from joy. Okay? See you all later. Bye-bye.